Have you ever felt that the weight of fear immobilizes you, as if every step you try to take is chained to insecurities and past losses? Perhaps your dreams have faded, your relationships have fractured, or opportunities evaporated from one day to the next. It is in those moments when anguish seems to dominate that a greater hope arises. God not only recognizes your fears, He promises to break those chains and restore that the world tried to take away from you. Its power is not limited to returning what was lost, but to multiplying the blessing, to heal the deepest wounds, and to light a light of purpose where before you only saw darkness. This message is not addressed to those who have given up, but to those who still yearn to see the hand of God at work in every corner of their lives. You will know promises that will fill you with confidence, stories that will fill you with confidence, stories that will fill you with confidence. They will remember that divine faithfulness overcomes any adversity, and principles that when applied will ignite an active and vibrant faith. Prepare to contemplate how fear fades in the presence of the Creator, how losses become new opportunities, and how hope is reborn with a force that transcends circumstances before it begins. This journey of transformation and faith, I want to invite you to make a powerful statement. Trusting in God, my fear is diluted, my hope multiplies, and my future is filled with its abundance. May these words mark the beginning of a profound change within you. Repeat this affirmation, take it to heart, and get ready to live the extraordinary restorative power that God has in store for you. And if you haven't already, subscribe and activate notifications so that YouTube will alert you when we upload a new video. Let's start. Number 1, God starts the fear, and He promises to accompany you. Fear can be an insistent visitor. Truth, he feels like a shadow that does not peel away, whispering doubts and painting a panorama full of insecurities. But let me tell you something, he is not alone in that struggle. Fear is not a sin, it is part of our humanity. God knows it. He does not point to you out for fear. He does not abandon you because you feel weak. Instead, He reaches out His hand to lift you up. Isaiah 41 verse 10 tells us, it says clearly, "Do not be afraid, because I am with you." It is not advice, it is a promise. You listen to it. It is with you even when you feel more alone, more vulnerable, more unable to move forward. Its presence is there and constant and faithful. You knew that fear has the ability to paralyze. It is like a weight that prevents you from moving, that steals your peace and locks you in a circle of doubts. It can be fear to the future, to lose what you love, to not be enough. But God, in His infinite grace, does not leave us trapped in that state. He tells you not to faint, because I am your God who strives you. He not only accompanies you, but gives you strength. It is a type of strength that does not depend on your abilities or your situation. It is a divine gift, a strength that comes from His power and that transforms what you thought impossible into reality. Think about this: when God promises to be with you, He doesn't do it halfway. He doesn't appear alone in the good times or leave you on the darkest days. He's a constant companion, a safe haven, a loving Father who never leaves that word with you. Change everything. You're not walking alone. Every step you take, He gives it with you. Every tear you shed, He sees it. Every sigh of weariness, He hears it. And not only does He listen to you, He also holds you. He says, "I will always help you. I will always hold you with the right hand of my righteousness." You realize the weight of those words. It's not a maybe, it's not a sometimes, it's an always. Always means that there's not a second of your life that He's not there to lift you up. It's amazing how our perspective changes when we accept this truth. Suddenly, fear loses its power, not because circumstances change immediately, but because something stronger enters the scene. Trust in God. That right hand of justice that He mentions is a symbol of total protection, of a justice that does not fail and that acts in favor of those who trust in Him. Imagine that powerful hand that holds you, that does not let you fall. That's the assurance that God gives you with Him. No matter what the world tries to take away from you, what's lost can be restored, and what seems to be an end can become a new beginning. But God does more than just call you to trust. He also exhorts you to take action. He says, "Do not faint." This is not just a phrase from Consuelo. It's a call to get up and not let circumstances defeat you. He assures you that His help is there. He also invites you to move with faith, to take that seemingly impossible step, because when you walk in faith, you stop focusing on fear and start to see the opportunities He puts in front of you. It's not about ignoring fear, but about facing it with the assurance that God is with you. opening the way, even in the most uncertain moments. What worries are preventing you from moving forward today? Keep in mind that God's presence turns your weakness into strength, your uneasiness into confidence, and your loss into a chance to encounter His healing power. Anxiety does not have the last say. He will always be at your side. Take a moment to take a deep breath and hold on to this promise. God not only sees you, He is acting on your behalf, holding you with His right hand of righteousness, assuring you that fear will not be your owner. Friend, with God, fear loses its power and you win victory. Number 2, what the world took from you, God gives back in abundance. Let me tell you something. I know that losses can hurt deeply. You may feel that those years you invested, those dreams you built, vanished like smoke in the air. Maybe a wrong decision, a betrayal, or a circumstance that you could not control took away what you valued most, and there you are looking at the rubble of what was once a field full of hope. The feeling of frustration can be overwhelming. How do you recover what seems irretrievable? How you fill the void left by what was lost is where God's promise in Joel 2 verse 25 comes in, and restore to you the years that the locust ate. You feel that this is not a simple statement, it is a guarantee of God's heart to you. God doesn't ignore what you lost. He doesn't minimize your pain or ask you to ignore it. But here's the incredible thing: where you see devastation, He sees an opportunity to restore. The locust, that symbol of destruction, doesn't have the last word. God promises not only to give you back what you lost, but to do it in such an amazing way that He will make it clear that His power and His love are greater than any loss. Restitution does not simply mean returning to the starting point. It means rebuilding and multiplying. God is not a God of patches, but of complete transformations. When He works, He does, so that what was once dry and empty will flourish like a fertile garden. Look at the example of Job. He lost all his possessions, his family, his health. From the outside, it seemed that his history had ended in ruins. But God, He didn't let that be the final chapter. He restored not only what He had lost, but He doubled it. That's God's nature. He doesn't just mend what was broken, but He raises it to a level you never imagined. Where the world brought lack, God brings fullness. Where there were tears, He sows joy. You can imagine what your life would be like if everything you lost not only came back, but that is the promise God makes in Joel 2 verse 25. It is not an empty comfort. It is a certainty for those who trust in Him. But there is something else we must understand. This restitution is not just about recovering material things or visible achievements. It is much deeper. God also heals broken hearts, restores the peace that the world tried to steal, and rebuilds the hope that you thought you had lost. To His work in your life is not limited to what you can touch or see. His restitution encompasses your whole being. When God restores you, He has new you from the inside out. Now you may wonder how I can believe in this promise when everything around me seems lost. Let me tell you something. Faith is not about ignoring reality, but about trusting that God has the power to transform it. The promise of restitution is there, but it requires you to take a step of trust. When you decide to believe, something begins to change within you. Hope is reborn, and even if external circumstances do not yet reflect it, you know that God is at work. You do not have to fear the future, because your past does not define it. God is the one who writes your history, and His pen never fails. So do not resign yourself to living in the ashes of what you have. It was lift up your gaze and remember who is your God. He is a God of abundance, a God who fulfills what He promises. When He says He will make restitution, He will do it, and He will do it in such an extraordinary way that it will lead you to understand that every loss was an opportunity for His glory to manifest itself in your life. Scarcity does not have the last word. Failure does not have the last word. God does. He rewrite your story, and its end is always abundant, full of hope. You're ready to see it work because He's already working on your restitution. Trust, wait, and prepare for what's coming, because it will be much greater than you ever imagined. Number 3, from shame to double honor. Shame can be an overwhelming weight, right? Maybe you felt that past decisions, your mistakes, or even the actions of others towards you have left a mark that you cannot erase. It is as if you carry an invisible sign that says, here is someone who failed. That kind of feeling can make you want to hide, that you are paralyzed with the fear that others will see what you're trying to hide. But listen to this. God does not see you as the world sees you. He does not define you by your faults, your mistakes, or the opinions of others, and more importantly, He doesn't want you to live under the weight of shame. In Isaiah 61 verse 7, God makes a promise that changes everything. Instead of your shame, double honor. He doesn't say that He will cover your shame or make you forget about it. He says that He will replace it. You can imagine it. What was once a source of humiliation becomes a source of dignity and glory. God not only compensates, He transforms that shame that seemed immovable, that made you feel small. Now is the place where His power acts to show His love and redemption. And it's not just any kind of raw, it's a double honor, a restoration that exceeds what you would have imagined. God has this incredible ability to turn around stories where there were tears and humiliation before. He plants seeds of joy where there was once an affront. He promises an inheritance, and not just any inheritance, but one that is lasting, that is not withered over time, nor is it dependent on circumstances. This change is not superficial. It is not just an external improvement for others to see something different. It is a transformation that begins in the heart, in how you see yourself, and in how you understand your worth. In God's eyes, the world may have tried to define you by your failures. Maybe you were told that you would never be enough, that you could never recover what you lost. But here's the truth. God has the last word, and His word always speaks of redemption and purpose in Him. Your identity is restored, and not just to the level where it was before, but much higher. He takes what seemed lost and turns it into something glorious. You know what happens when you begin to accept this truth? The fear of not being accepted loses all its power. That fear who told you that you are not enough, or that people will always judge you, fades away, because now you understand that your worth does not depend on the opinions of others. God has given you His honor. He has called you son, daughter, and when you know who you are in Him, human opinions no longer enslave you. This security frees you to walk boldly, to lift your head and face the world without fear of that they say or think. You no longer live defined by what happened, but by what God is doing in your life. And believe me, His work is beautiful, complete, and full of purpose. He leaves no loose ends, leaves no marks unhealed. Everything transforms. Isaiah 6:17 reminds us that history does not end in shame. God rewrites the pages of your life with ink of grace, dignity, and glory. When once it was a dark chapter, now shine with its light in its hands. What the world tried to stain becomes a reason for praise. So why keep carrying that shame? Let go of it and receive the honor that God has already prepared for you. He doesn't just want to set you free. He wants to lift you up to a place where His glory shines through your history. You're ready to receive that double honor because it's already in path. Number 4, deep healing of the wounded heart. Pain can be invisible, but that doesn't make it any less real. True, sometimes we carry wounds so deep that it seems that they will never heal. They are scars that are not seen, but that are there reminding us of difficult moments, betrayals, words that broke us inside, or even our own decisions that left a mark. And let me tell you, it is normal feeling like this. Life with its unexpected twists and turns, it leaves us scars, both external and internal. But here is the truth that changes everything. God sees those wounds. He does not ignore them. He does not minimize them, and He definitely does not let you face them alone. Jeremiah 37 is a promise that says everything, but I will bring healing to you, and I will heal your wounds. Jehovah says, it is not a maybe, it is not a maybe, it is a divine commitment. God promises healing, and not just any kind of healing. He doesn't just cover wounds, He restores them from the root. Maybe you thought that some scars are too deep, too old, or too complex to be healed, but let me remind you of something. There's no wound so deep that it escapes the reach of God's love. His promise has no limits, and that includes your most hidden pains. When God says He will bring healing, it's not just about the physical body. His healing, He is integral. He heals the broken heart, the tormented mind, and the tired spirit. He is like a doctor who not only treats the symptoms, but goes directly to the origin of the problem. Maybe you feel that something inside you broke, and that nothing and no one can fix it. But God says, give me that which hurts. Let me show you what I can do. And when He intervenes, the broken pieces not only come together, they transform on something stronger and more beautiful than before. Think about it for a moment. God doesn't work superficially. He doesn't put band-aids on wounds. He goes deep into where it hurts the most and starts working from there. And yes, sometimes that process may seem slow, or even uncomfortable, but trust in this. He knows what he does. His purpose is not just to take away the pain, but to transform your life completely. When allow your healing to flow, not only do you regain peace, but also freedom to live without fear, without resentment, and without those invisible chains that kept you tied to the past. We have to be honest with God in order to enable that healing to occur. Even though He already sees everything, we sometimes attempt to conceal our suffering from Him. You don't have to act like everything is okay. Even if you're feeling confused, angry, or disappointed, He encourages you to express your feelings to Him. Your candor is not offensive to Him. In actuality, giving your suffering to God is the first step toward healing. And this is the most potent part. Unbelievable things happen. The bonds of hatred and resentment start to loosen. It seems as if the holy salve starts working right away, relieving the discomfort. It might be difficult to let go of the most difficult aspects of your heart, but keep in mind that every time you do so, you give God more room to work on it. It creates something quite different from what you give it. According to Jeremiah 37, God will use the scars you believed would define you forever to reveal His splendor in your life, proving that sorrow does not have the last say. Not only does He cure, but He also restores, fortifies, and offers a fresh start. Therefore, have faith that God is at work even if the anguish seems unbeatable right now. His healing does more than just relieve the suffering. It also restores strength, brings hope, and opens a path full of meaning. God is with you throughout this journey, and you will eventually find that the wounds from the past are testaments to His strength and love rather than reminders of suffering. God is already extending His hand to begin number 5, so we are prepared to allow Him to heal those wounds. One of the most frightening stories in the Bible is Job's example of restoration at the conclusion, which doubles the tale of Job. Imagine this. All of his animals, fortune, and children are gone in a single day, as if his life had been washed away by a storm. If that weren't enough, his health is becoming worse to the point that he has sores all over it. In addition to money losses, he was also experiencing extreme bodily and mental suffering. As if that weren't enough, Job maintained his faithfulness through all of this, and it's not that he didn't question or feel the weight of his pain. However, the people who ought to console him, his closest friends, condemn him by implying that he must have done something to deserve so much suffering. This may sound familiar to you, but it's that feeling of being alone at your worst with no one truly understanding why you're here. He did, of course. He wept and moaned. He felt alone, but he never blamed God. Job held on to his faith despite his misery. That doesn't mean he had immediate answers or that he understood everything that was happening. Rather, his faithfulness was an act of pure confidence to believe that even though he could not see the purpose in his suffering, God was still present and in control. Job shows us that being faithful is not pretending that everything is okay, but continuing to trust God even when everything seems to be going wrong. And this is where the extraordinary comes in. In Job 42 verse 10, we see how God intervenes. At the end of his story and doubled all things that had been, this isn't just a restoration, it's a multiplication. God didn't give back to Job what he had lost, simply to balance things out. He went much further, gave him new blessings, new joys, and a deeper understanding of his character. Loss and suffering weren't the final chapter. They were the preparation for something much greater. But what God restored wasn't just material. If Job received more wealth, he had children again, and his health was renewed. But the greatest thing was the understanding he gained of who God is. In the end, Job not only had more possessions, but also a deeper relationship with the Creator. His story is not just about rewards, but about how trials can transform us and bring us to a place of greater intimacy with God. This has as much to do with you as with Job. Maybe you're in a difficult season right now. Maybe you've lost things that were important to you, whether it's a job, relationships, dreams, or even your health. And maybe like Job, you feel that suffering is endless, that pain has no purpose. Indeed, Job's experience gives us hope that God sees your loyalty, your tears, and your endurance even when you don't have all the answers. You may be certain that your tale will continue if you have faith in Him. Don't be scared of the challenging times. While they may seem to be a desert, God uses them as a place to lay the seeds for something far bigger. Recall that God's restoration is a whole metamorphosis, a benefit that constantly surpasses what you believed you had lost, rather than a straightforward return to where you were before. So, even if you can't see how your story will end, now trust that God already has the end written, and is one full of abundance and purpose. Job is living proof that there is no loss that God cannot transform into a victory. If he did it for Job, he can do it for you. God has the power to take the ashes of what you lost and turn them into a work of art that reflects his glory. Your only task is to trust, persevere, and wait in his perfect timing, because in the end, like Job, you will discover that what God has prepared is much greater than you ever imagined. Number 6, sowing in tears, reaping with joy. Sometimes life feels like a dry field, true, a ground that you work with all your effort, but that seems not to bear fruit, and there you are sowing seeds in tears, wondering if all this work, if all this pain will be worth it. Let me tell you something. God sees every effort, every tear, and does not allow any of that to be wasted. Psalm 12:65 reminds us of a powerful truth. Those who sowed with tears, with rejoicing will reap. This is not just an empty hope. It is a promise that even if it hurts you now, what you are sowing will bear fruit, and not just any fruit, but a harvest that will bring joy and restoration. Sow with tears. It is not easy. It is to work while the heart is heavy. It's moving forward when everything inside you wants to stop. It's putting your hands in the ground when your strength seems to have abandoned you, but you know that every tear that falls is watering that earth. Those seeds that you now sow, even if it doesn't seem like it, are germinating. Maybe the ground you face now looks barren, dry, as if nothing good could come out of it, but God sees what you don't see. He knows that what you do, who is sowing with faith even in the midst of pain, is preparing the way for a harvest of blessings. The psalm assures us that this story does not end with tears. There is a promise of harvest, and not just any harvest, a harvest full of joy. Imagine this: the tears that now fall are not a waste. They are the fertilizer that God uses to grow something greater, something that you cannot imagine yet. Those tears, they are an investment. The result of your perseverance is not loss, it is gain, and not only material. God's harvest also includes peace for your mind, action for your heart, and renewed faith. It is a joy that does not depend on circumstances, but on divine work. I know that now it may be difficult to believe. Maybe you feel that your efforts are not bearing fruit, or that the crying has lasted too long. But here is the key. Tears are not the end. What now seems like a path full of trials, in God's perspective, is the path to a multiplication that will surprise you. He transforms pain into purpose, the seed sown in faith into a powerful testimony of his faithfulness. Where before there was fear of failure, God is preparing a cause for celebration. This does not mean that the process will always be easy. God does not. He promises a path without challenges, but he does assure that in the end the fruit will be abundant. Every tear shed is told by him, none is wasted, and although now the ground seems inhospitable, keep sowing, keep trusting. The joy will come, and when it does, you will understand that all the effort was worth it. Trust that God does not leave his children in anguish. He turns crying into laughter, tiredness into rest. Pain and joy you're sowing, although difficult, is not in vain. His promise is Clara, what you sow with tears you will reap with joy, and when that moment you will look back and see that every tear was part of the miracle. So keep going, keep sowing, because the God who promised to bring the harvest is faithful to fulfill it. Your field will flourish, and when he does, your tears will be remembered not as a symbol of defeat, but as a symbol of defeat. But like the start of the greatest victory. Number 7, new things in the middle of the desert. The desert can be overwhelming. True, it's that stage of life when everything seems dry, where the effort doesn't produce fruit and hopes seem to evaporate under an unrelenting sun. Maybe you feel trapped there. Right now you look around and you only see drought. The doors are closed, the roads blocked, and it seems that you don't. There is a way out. The desert is not just a physical place, it is a state of the heart, a feeling of emptiness and exhaustion. But here is the good news. God does not leave you in that desert forever. Isaiah 43 verse 19 gives us a promise that can change everything. Behold, I am doing something new, soon it will come to light. You will not know it. Look closely at what God is saying. He does not say that he is going to repair something old, doesn't say he'll make a little fix to make things a little better. Nell says, I'm doing something new. You can imagine it. something completely fresh, something that didn't exist before. When all seems lost, when there are no visible roads, God is working behind the scenes to open paths where there weren't. He's a God who isn't limited by the environment. The desert can be a lifeless place, but for God, it's the perfect setting to demonstrate his creative power. And here comes the incredible part. God doesn't just do something new, he invites us to see it. Not that question shakes us. Sometimes we're so focused on the dryness of the desert that we can't see the rivers that God is beginning to open. We're so caught up in the past, in what was or what's missing, that we don't notice the way that he is already tracing in front of us. That's why God calls us to open our eyes, to look with faith. Because even though everything seems arid now, soon his work will come to light. Imagine this: you are in the middle of a desert, exhausted, without strength. Suddenly you see a river flowing, where before there was nothing. That is the image that God gives us here. He promises to open paths in the middle of the desert and rivers. In solitude, it's not amazing when the world says there's no solution. God creates one where everyone sees scarcity. He sees abundance. Where there's only dust, he sees life. His power isn't limited by the circumstances around you. But what do we do while we wait for that river? That way, here's the key. Actively trust. God doesn't call us to sit idly by, but to keep the expectation of his intervention. Faith, it's not just waiting, is looking around with hope, knowing that God is working even when we don't see him, is learning to recognize those small signs of change, those first drops of water in the middle of drought, and thanking him for what is to come. The desert is not the end of the story. Isaiah 43:19 reminds us that God is an expert in transforming the impossible into possible. He will not only take you out of the desert, will make it a place of life, of growth, of purpose. The paths it will open and the rivers it will flow will not only sustain you, but will lead you to a new, better place, full of its blessings. Thus, don't let hopelessness influence you. Don't be afraid of the desert. God is at work, and he has made a strong promise. He will do something novel and incredible that you won't be able to ignore. The desert is not your fate. Rather, it is just the start of a magnificent masterpiece that God is about to unveil in your life. Simply trust, be vigilant, and prepare yourself, for what God is constructing is much more than you can fathom. 8th, spiritual rejuvenation and direction on the correct course. Sometimes the soul seems worn out, as if choices and problems have a different weight. Disappointments will accumulate until they wear us down completely. Maybe you are there right now, feeling that your interior is exhausted, without the strength to move forward. And it is not only the physical age, it is something deeper. It is that spiritual exhaustion that comes when you have struggled, you have dreamed, but it seems that the world simply does not cooperate in those moments. Psalm 233 resonates like a balm for the heart. It will comfort my soul. It will guide me along paths of justice for his name's sake. You realize how powerful that is. God doesn't ignore your tiredness. He sees it, he understands it, and most importantly, he wants to restore you. This comfort is not like a superficial rest. It's not a momentary respite. It's something much deeper. God enters the core of your being. In that place where anxieties, fears, and wounds accumulate, and he begins to work. He calm the inner storm, clear away confusion, and bring a peace that the world cannot offer. It's as if I were telling you, I know you are tired, but let me be your refuge. Let me renew your strength. And it's not just comfort, it's renewal. When God comforts your soul, he not only relieves the pain, but fills you again. It's a complete resupply, a strengthening that gives you the courage to face whatever comes. Sometimes we think we have to fend for ourselves, that our weakness is a flaw. But here's the truth. God doesn't expect you to do it. Only his presence in your life is not temporary. He's there to walk with you, to lift you up when you feel like you can't take another step. But that's not all. God not only restores your soul, he also guides you, and this part is crucial because sometimes fatigue does not come only from tiredness, but from not knowing where to go, from that constant fear of taking the wrong path, to getting lost in decisions that lead you to more confusion. But God promises something incredible. He guides you along paths of justice. This means that he not only gives you a path, but he gives you the right path, one that is in line with his purpose, with his will, and that leads to a life full of peace and contentment. Imagine this: you're in a dark forest with no idea how to get out. Then someone comes along with an eternal one and tells you, come, I know where to go. That's what God does for us. He guides us on a straight path, not to punish us or control us, but because he knows what's best for us when we follow his paths. We don't have to fear getting lost or lost. He guides you because you are his child, because his glory is tied to your well-being, and because you honor his name, you will receive blessings, peace, and an unwavering certainty that you are exactly where you need to be. There's nothing more beautiful than this. God does not do this because we deserve it, nor does he guide and comfort us because we have done something to deserve it. His love is the reason for his care. Psalm 23 verse 3 is a call to surrender, to rest in God, and to have faith that he will not only heal you, but also guide you down righteous and safe ways. You do not have to bear the burden of determining your own path, nor do you need to be afraid of uncertainty. God is with you, reviving your inner self and directing your course. Error is not an option. Only peace, security, and a hopeful future are. The ninth is a completely remade creation, a new identity in Christ. What a weight the past may be. The harsh reality is that sometimes we feel as if our previous choices are haunting us, reminding us of who we were, and that we will never be able to change. Errors, failures, and the labels we have been given seem like shackles we cannot escape. The reality that transforms everything in Christ is that you have a new identity, not merely a chance to start again. Perhaps you've been caught in that loop, fearing that you'll revert to your old habits and let your past define who you are now. According to 2 Corinthians 5 verse 17, if someone is in Christ, they are a new creature. The old things are gone, and see, everything has been made new. You understand how profound this is. We're not talking about a minor attitude shift or change in lifestyle. God does something far more profound than simply painting over your past mistakes. He completely changes you from the inside out. Everything that once defined you is gone in Christ, and you are not doomed to make the same mistakes again. You are a new creation, totally renewed and free from the burden of the past. You may ask how that is possible. How can I truly let go of everything I've been? The answer lies in the power of Christ, who not only pardons your sins, but also gives you a new nature, a new way of seeing and living. It seems as if God took all that was shattered and started again. But this time, with his perfect design, you already don't have to worry about the past defining your future, because in Christ, your history is not destined to repeat itself. Think about it. You don't have to be the same person you used to be because old things with all of their flaws and scars no longer have power over you. Christ has given you a whole new identity, and that identity doesn't depend on what you've done or what he did for you on the cross. Now, your worth, your purpose, and your destiny are decided by him, not by your failures or the voices of the past. And here's the most liberating thing. This new identity not only relieves the burden of the past, it also equips you to live differently. You may now walk with confidence because you know that Christ is doing more than simply helping you live a new manner, transforms, but gives you the tools to live according to that transformation. You no longer have to fear falling into the same mistakes because he strengthens you, guides you, and fills you with purpose. Accepting this new identity is embracing a life full of hope. It is letting go of the fear of failure and starting to walk in God's grace. It is knowing that even if the world tries to remind you of who you were, God has already declared who you are now, your son, your daughter, completely renewed, completely loved, and that identity is what gives you the strength to face the present and the future without fear. So why keep carrying a past that God has already left behind? Why let the old dictate your value or your destiny in Christ? You are a new creation, and that means that what you were no longer matters because everything has been made new. Now you can live freely, confidently, and with the certainty that your life is in the hands of a God who has given you an eternal identity full of purpose and purpose. Hope number 10, restoration to double for prisoners of hope. Sometimes we feel trapped. Truth, as if life has put us in a dead-end cell with stopped dreams and prayers that seem to have no answer. But look at something. Zechariah 99:12 doesn't call us prisoners of despair. He calls us prisoners of hope. That changes everything, because even if you're in the midst of difficulty, there's something inside you that keeps believing, keep waiting. That hope isn't naive, it's powerful, it's an inner light that doesn't go out, Even in the darkest moments, it's the certainty that even though you're fighting now, God isn't done with you. God, he tells you, go back to strength. That strength is not a physical place, it is his presence. It is a call to stop looking at the size of the problem and focus your heart on it. Maybe you feel weak, tired of trying and not seeing results. But let me remind you of something. The strength of God is impenetrable. When you return to him, you find protection. You find refuge, and you find the peace that the world cannot give you. He's a distant observer of your troubles. He's your strong tower, your safe place in the middle of the storm. Now here's the extraordinary thing about this verse. God doesn't just promise to deliver you, he promises to restore you to double. You can imagine that everything you've lost, everything that seemed irretrievable, won't just be returned, will be multiplied. God is not a God of minimal compensations. He's a God of overabundance. Look what he did with Job. He gave him back twice what he had lost. That's the power of his promise. When he intervenes, what seemed like an end becomes a new beginning, and a much better one than you could imagine. But here's the key. Hope that keeps you standing even when things don't make sense. Keeping hope isn't easy, especially when everything around seems dark. But it is precisely in those moments when hope becomes an act of faith. It is believing that God's promise is greater than circumstances. It is trusting that the pain is not permanent and that its restoration is already on its way. The fear of ruin has no place when you understand this, because if God has promised to restore you, who can stop his plan? He not only prepares an end, but he prepares a better outcome, the future that exceeds your wildest expectations. For this reason, Zechariah 912's promise to double you is not only a lovely phrase, rather it is a firm reality and a divine assurance that your tale will conclude in triumph rather than defeat. So keep going, keep waiting, keep trusting your hope in God. It's not useless. He sees every tear, hears every prayer, and he's working on your behalf, even when you can't see it. What now seems like a captivity is only the prelude to a glorious freedom. And when that time comes, when his promise is fulfilled, you will realize that it was worth every second of waiting. He will restore you and not only give you back what you lost, he will do it with interest, with blessings that will surpass everything you had imagined. Stand firm, prisoner of hope, because the double restoration is already there on path number 11. After suffering comes perfection and strength. Suffering can feel eternal. It's not like that when you're in the middle of a trial. Each day seems longer than the previous one, and the end just isn't seen. You wonder how much longer it can endure, how long it's going to hurt. But here's the truth it gives us. 1 Peter 5, verse 10, that suffering isn't permanent. It's just a little while. And even though it seems endless now, God is using this process to bring you to something bigger, fuller, stronger. He doesn't allow pain because it does have a purpose, one that we don't always understand in the moment, but that produces something glorious. In the end, you know what's the most incredible thing about this verse? That it doesn't say that God sends someone else to help you. It says that he himself intervenes. No delegate, don't let him do the work. He, the God of all grace, the one who called you to his eternal glory in Christ, is the one who comes to you in the midst of your suffering to perfect you. That's love in action. It's as if he says, I know this hurts, but I'm here with you. I'm molding your character, polishing your life, making something beautiful out of what now seems broken. And it's not just about superficial perfection. God works deeply on the A's of your life that need to be transformed, in those corners that perhaps you didn't even know needed change. He doesn't leave you scarred by suffering. He doesn't let those scars define who you are. Instead, he uses those same wounds to demonstrate his power, his grace, and his ability to restore everything that seemed lost with him. Suffering is not the end. It's a bridge towards something much greater, but there is more. God not only perfects, he also affirms, strengthens, and establishes. Notice these words. Affirming means that it gives you stability when the storms of life strike again. You will no longer shake as before. You will have a solid foundation, a faith that does not break easily. Then strengthening. This is more than having physical strength. It is that inner strength that allows you to face challenges with a renewed resistance. The things that before made you go backwards will no longer have the same power over you. And finally, establishing. This speaks of deep-rootedness, of being so firmly planted in faith that nothing can move you. It's like a tree with deep roots that withstands any storm. And here's what changes the perspective completely. Pain is not the end, it's the beginning of something. It's like a seed that, at first it seems insignificant, but when it is planted, it grows and produces something fruitful. Every tear you have shed, every moment you felt you couldn't take it anymore, God has been using to make you grow, to bring you to a place of greater spiritual maturity, to a point where your faith shines brightest. Suffering is not a dead end. It is the way God uses to perfect your character, strengthen your spirit, and secure yourself in His love. When you understand this, the fear of trials begins to fade, not because the pain is any less real, but because you know it is not in vain. God is with you, working through every difficult time to bring you to a more steady life, more stable, more full of His glory. So if you're in the midst of a trial right now, remember, this isn't forever, it's just a little time. And in the end, God will perfect you, affirm you, strengthen you, and establish you, because He leaves nothing incomplete. His work in your life is perfect, and the result will be a fuller, firmer, and more luminous life in His grace. Stand firm, because restoration is already on the way. Number 12, plans for peace and hope. A future assured in God. The future can be terrifying. True, sometimes it seems like a big question mark that stares at us, making us doubt if the decisions we make today will take us to the right place tomorrow. Maybe you found yourself in nights of insomnia, thinking about your worries, wondering if you're taking the right path, or if things will turn out as you expect. That fear, that feeling of not having control, can be overwhelming, but let me tell you something that will change your perspective. Your future does not depend on chaos or chance. It is in the hands of a God who already has a perfect plan for you. Jeremiah 29 verse 11 says it clearly. Because I know the thoughts I have about you, Jehovah says, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you the end you hope for. You hear it. God has thoughts of peace upon you. That means that even when your present seems like a storm, He is already planning your rainbow. Nothing in your life is out of His reach or control. He does not improvise. He is not surprised by what you face. He has a carefully designed plan, not to hurt you, but to prosper, to bring you to an end full of hope. And that plan is not based on your mistakes or successes, but on His unconditional love and perfect wisdom. Think about it for a moment. If God, the creator of the universe, says He has a plan for you, it is not worth trusting. He is like an architect who has designed every detail, not only of your future, but also of your present. Although now don't understand how the pieces fit together, He already sees the whole picture. His plan doesn't include confusion or ultimate failure. Yes, there may be trials along the way, but those trials are not destiny. They are part of the process to get you to the place He has prepared. And best of all, this plan is not just any plan, it's a plan full of hope. God doesn't just want to give you a future. He wants to give you the end you hope for. That means that His intention is not just for you to survive. His intention is for you to flourish, to experience a life full of His peace, His purpose, and His joy. When you trust in this plan, the fear of the unknown loses power. You no longer have to fear failure or disappointment, because you know that the end of your story is already assured in His hands. Now, trust in God's plan does not mean standing still, waiting for everything to just happen. Faith is active. It is telling God, I trust you, and I want to walk in alignment with your purposes. This involves seeking His direction in prayer, obeying His word, and moving forward even when you don't see everything, of course, because even if the road has curves or steep climbs, the destination is always one of peace and prosperity. And here is the beautiful thing: when you trust in God's plans, you can walk calmly with an assurance that the world cannot offer. It does not mean that there will be no challenges, but it means that those challenges will not dictate your destiny. Your future is assured not by what you can do, but by what God has already done and will continue to do for you. Jeremiah 29 verse 11 gives us a promise that dispels fear and fills us with hope. No matter how uncertain your tomorrow may seem, you can be sure of this: God has already laid out a path of peace for you. So move forward with confidence, knowing that your story is not in the hands of chance, but in the loving hands of the God who never fails. He is writing a better ending than you can imagine, and all you have to do is trust and walk in His direction. Your future is assured, and it is brilliant because it is in the hands of the best architect of all. Number 13, God lifts from the abyss and brings life back. Sometimes life takes you places so dark that it seems impossible to get out. It is not true. Those moments when you feel that you have hit rock bottom, that everything around you has collapsed, and the only thing you can do is look up looking for a ray of light, such if you ever find yourself there right now in an emotional, spiritual, or even physical abyss, fear, anguish, and despair seem to drown you, and the constant question is, how do I get out of here? But listen to this. Psalm 71:20 says something incredible. You who have made me see many anguish and evils, you will give me life again, and again you will lift me up from the abysses of the earth. God not only see where you are, promised to raise you and bring you back to life. That abyss isn't final. It may feel like the lowest place you've ever reached, but it's not the end of your story, yes? Maybe everything seems dark now, and it's normal to be afraid of not being able to get up from there. But God is an expert at making the impossible possible. No matter how deep that well is, He can reach you. No matter how far away you feel, His hand is what long enough to rescue you. You're not alone and definitely not out of reach. God doesn't just lift you up, He brings you back to life. That means He doesn't just pull you out of the pit to leave you adrift. He restores completely where there was hopelessness before. He puts hope where there was emotional or spiritual death. He brings a rebirth, a new perspective, a reason to move forward. When God intervenes, His restoration is not He takes what seemed lost and transforms it into something that shines with His purpose and His glory. You know something? That abyss, as painful as it may be, can also be a place of learning. It is in those moments of greatest weakness where we learn to depend completely on God. At the bottom of the well, there are no distractions. Only He and His power to lift us up. And when we come out of there, we are not the same. Not only do we survive, but we are transformed. The abyss is not a place of defeat. It is the beginning of a new beginning. It is the place where God takes our ashes and turns them into beauty, where He transforms our tears into joy. But to come out, we need to hold on to His promise, trust that His word is true, that His promise to lift you up and bring you back to life will not fail every moment of anguish. That you are living now, it's temporary. God hasn't left you in that pit forever. His purpose is to rescue you, restore you, and put you on a firm footing. But you need to believe it. Even when everything around you seems to scream otherwise, hold on to the certainty that His power has no limits, that fear of staying sunk, that things will never change, begins to disappear when you remember who God is. He doesn't just pull you out of the abyss, He drives you towards a fuller, firmer, more hopeful life. Psalm 71:20 is a reminder that no matter how deep you have fallen, His grace is deeper. He will bring you back to life. And when He does, He will emerge with more strength, more conviction, and a story of restoration that only He can write. So if you sit in that abyss today, remember this: you are not meant to stay there. God is already there, working even in the darkness to lift you up and give you back everything you thought you lost. Hold on to His promise, because your story doesn't end in the pit with Him. There's always a new beginning. He'll lift you up, and when He does, you'll be a living testimony of His love, His power, and His faithfulness. Number 14, flying like eagles, renewed strength to move forward. There are times when you just feel like you can't anymore. True, like if the weight of life were too much, as if every step you take will cost more than you have to offer. It's that kind of tiredness that not only affects your body, but also your mind and spirit. Although you may feel like you're running out of steam after enduring a protracted period of hardship, Isaiah 43 serves as a reminder of the following truth: those who wait, they will run and not walk, they will not be weary, and they will lift up their wings like eagles. Because God not only knows that you are tired, but He also promises to renew you and give you new strength to go forward. Waiting on God is not a passive act. It is trusting in His plan and His timing. And it is knowing that even if you feel weak right now, you have His strength available to you. Active waiting not only gives you patience, but it also generates a supernatural energy that enables you to get up when everything inside of you tells you that you can no longer handle it. The most beautiful thing is that it is not about your abilities, but rather its power working in you. Take the example of the eagle. This is not an animal that gets stuck in strong winds. Instead, He uses them to rise higher. God wants you to think of it as an example of what He can do in your life. He gives you the power to not only weather the storm, but also to soar above it, to view things from a higher, more expansive perspective, and to realize that you can overcome obstacles, because you can do so with God. Temporary is constant. It is a continuous renewal that allows you to move forward without fear of exhaustion. You can run and not get tired, walk and not fatigue, because your energy does not depend on what you have inside, but on what God pours out on you. He knows that there are times when the road seems endless, but he also knows exactly how to sustain in each step, and this leads us to something incredible. To persevere without exhaustion with God's strength, you don't just survive, you move forward with purpose. Every step you take is firm because you know you're not walking alone. Even when circumstances try to stop you, his strength drives you to keep going, no matter how long the road is, no matter how high the mountains seem, his power enough to carry you to the end. Isaiah 43 isn't just a promise. It's a reminder that no matter how tired you are, God has all you need to continue. He not only renews your strength, but he gives you wings like eagles, allowing you to fly. Above the storms of life with his strength, the fear of fatigue disappears. You can run without stopping, walk without fainting, and best of all, move towards the goal with the certainty that his support is unwavering. So don't give up, wait for him, because when you do discover that its power is enough to transform your tiredness into a new beginning full of energy and hope. Number 15, everything cooperates for good rest in the divine purpose. Sometimes life feels like an incomplete puzzle. It's not true. You're there holding pieces that don't make sense, wondering how do the trials, the difficult moments, the disappointments fit into the big picture. All of that seems to have no purpose. You wonder, why is this happening to me? How can this turmoil lead to anything constructive? However, Romans 8 verse 28 presents a potent truth. To those who love God, everything, not only the things we can comprehend or the things that presently appear to be destroying your life, works out for your benefit. It is simple to believe that suffering is pointless while we are in the midst of a storm. When faced with difficult situations, we often wonder where God is involved and why he permits them to occur. However, Romans assures us that nothing at all is a coincidence, that every tear, every struggle, every loss is part of God's perfect plan, that he wastes nothing, and that even the most agonizing experiences in his hands have a greater purpose that is often invisible to us at the time, but is working for our good. Take a close look at this promise. God does not minimize or deny your suffering. Rather, he promises that everything you experience, both good and bad and inexplicable, will be turned into something that will benefit you more. That does not mean that pain is good, but it does mean that God can bring good out of evil. Think of it as a tapestry from below. It looks like a tangle of threads, but from above, it's a masterpiece. God is seeing that whole picture even when you only see the loose threads. But this promise has a key component. It's for those who love God. Loving God means trusting him even when things don't make sense. It's recognizing that his perspective is infinitely broader than ours. We see only a small fraction of the story, while he sees the beginning, the middle, and the end. When you decide to love and trust God, you begin to let go of the fear that your life will be meaningless. You stop fighting the pieces of the puzzle and allow him to put them together. And here's the most beautiful thing. This love for God leads you to rest in his sovereignty, knowing that he rules over every detail of your life, that nothing escapes his control, brings a peace that the world can't offer. You don't have to understand it all. Now you don't have to figure it out for yourself. Romans 88 verse 28 is an anchor for the soul, a constant reminder that God is at work even when we don't see him. Every experience, even the most difficult ones, has a noble purpose. He is writing your story with every thread, with every piece of the puzzle, and he is doing it for your good. So, let go of fear, trust in his plan, and rest in the knowledge that everything, yes, everything, cooperates for a greater good in God's hands. You just need to trust that everything will make sense in its perfect timing, that trust will ultimately be more beautiful, fuller, and glorious than you could ever imagine. Who loves you beyond what you can imagine. Your life is secure in him, and his work in you will be perfect, restorative, and full of purpose. Number 16, transforming anxiety into divine peace. Anxiety is like an internal storm. It's not true. It feels like the noise in your mind doesn't go away, as if worries are crushing you little by little. Maybe you're thinking about the bills that you have to pay, for the decisions you have to make, the problems that seem to have no solution. All that accumulates, and before you know it, you find yourself carrying a weight that was never yours to carry. But here is the good news. Philippians 4 verse 6 gives us a way out. tells us for nothing, be anxious, but let your requests be known before God in all prayer, and I pray with thanksgiving. God does not. It asks you to ignore your worries, invites you to erase. Anxiety is a reality of modern life. We live in a world that demands more of us than we can give, and it is normal to feel overwhelmed. Anxiety affects your body, your mind, and your spirit, but what this scripture reminds us is that we are not designed to carry those worries alone. God tells you not to be anxious, not because your problems are not important, but because I want you to trust me with them. Presenting our request to God is not a simple formality, it is a liberation. It's like telling you, Lord, here is everything I can't handle, I put it in your hands, and how we do it through prayer, but not just any prayer. Philippians says that this prayer must be accompanied by gratitude. Why? Because when you thank, you are acknowledging everything that God has already done for you. Gratitude changes your perspective. You stop focusing only on what is missing and start to see what you already have. Maybe today you have problems, but you also have a roof over your head, people who love you, and above all, a God who is with you. That thanksgiving not only honors God, it also calms your soul. And here is the promise that transforms everything when you give Him your worries to God. He doesn't just listen. He gives you something in return, His peace, not just any peace, but one that surpasses all understanding. It's that peace that doesn't make sense to the world, that inexplicable calm that comes even when you can't see the immediate answer. That serenity serves as a protector in your heart and mind, shielding you from the cacophony of worry and serving as a reminder that God is in charge. God's peace is independent of your situation. Even if the issue persists, something inside you shifts. You just know that the universe's creator, God, is on your side and you are no longer striving. You don't have to know how He'll handle things. You simply need to have faith that He will. His calm is more powerful than any worries. In what ways does this relate to your life? It's as easy as stopping and praying at those stressful times. You don't need fancy words. You just need to be honest, then express gratitude for everything, even little things, and then have faith. Remember that God is at work even when you can't see Him. Trust opens the door to divine peace. Philippians 4 verse 6 is more than just a verse. It's an invitation to live differently, to let God carry the burden that you can't carry, in His peace that guards your heart and your thoughts. Anxiety doesn't have the last word. God turns it into an opportunity to trust Him more deeply, and when you do, you find a peace that changes everything. Number 17, strength and courage in God's presence. Life is full of challenges that sometimes seem greater than our own strength. Sometimes fear paralyzes you and discouragement threatens to bring you to your knees. Perhaps you're facing an obstacle that seems insurmountable right now, and you're wondering how to proceed. However, pay attention to these words from Joshua 1. Do not be afraid or dismayed, for Jehovah your God will be with you wherever you go. This is not simple advice. It is a direct command from God. He is calling you to be strong, to have courage, and to walk with confidence. Because you are not alone. Being brave does not mean not feeling fear. Courage is acting in spite of it. It is getting up when everything inside you wants to surrender, is to take that step forward even when you do not see the full path. God does not ask you to eliminate your human emotions, but not to let them control your decisions. Being brave is deciding to trust your power more than in your own limitations, because in it you find the strength that you do not have on your own. Effort is also key. You cannot expect things to change if you are not willing to work, to move forward, to give everything of yourself. God promises you His help, but also asks for your participation. Striving means doing your part, even when it is difficult. And here is the important thing: when you combine your effort with the courage that comes from God, you become an unstoppable person. But there is something that constantly holds us back. Fear, that fear of failing, of losing, of not being enough, and discouragement, that feeling that everything you do is not worth it. Joshua directly addresses these emotions. Do not be afraid or dismayed. He says God knows that these feelings are natural, but He also knows that they cannot define your path. He is telling you, I said, no, let fear and tiredness stop you. Because with their presence, those obstacles have no real power over you. And here is the promise that changes everything. Jehovah your God will be with you wherever you go. No matter if you are facing the greatest challenge of your life or taking small steps towards a new beginning, God is with you. His constant presence not only gives you security, but eliminates loneliness. Know you are fighting. Only He is there walking by your side, guiding you, holding you when you feel that you can't take it anymore. That promise is an anchor that keeps you steady, even in the strongest storms now. How do we apply this in our daily lives? First, every time you face a challenge, remind yourself that courage does not come from not being afraid, but from acting with trust in God. Do it with effort, putting everything you want, you have in what He has called you to do, then seek His guidance in every decision. Do not walk alone, pray, read His word, and listen to His direction. Finally, when fear or discouragement tries to creep into your mind, remember the promise: God is with you every step, in every turn, in every battle. His presence is your strength. Joshua 1 is not just a verse, it is a constant reminder that with God by your side, there is no reason to fear. You can be brave, strive, and move forward because you do not walk alone. The next time fear tries to stop you, remember God has commanded you to be strong and courageous, and with His presence, no challenge it is too big. Move forward with confidence, because with Him, everything is possible. Throughout these reflections, you have contemplated God's unwavering faithfulness in the face of every fear, loss, and wound. You have seen how His hand not only heals the aching heart, but also abundantly restores what the world tried to steal from you. He does not limit Himself to giving you what you lost. His grace goes further, multiplying blessings, granting you a new one, and renewing the strength you thought exhausted. In His presence, the desert blooms, tears become seeds of joy, and the chains of the past are broken before the truth that in Christ you are a new creation. Each section has reminded you that fear does not have the last word, that suffering is not the end, and that even in the midst of uncertainty, God draws plans for peace and hope for your life. The key is to trust His promises, wait in His time, pray with a grateful heart, and believe that beyond the visible, He is working on your behalf now that we come to the end. It's not about putting these truths on paper, it's about living them, holding on to them with faith and determination. God has shown you His restorative power and the scope of His love. The next step is you. Keep the fire of hope alive, hold firm the certainty that His hand is holding you, and keep moving fearlessly into the future He prepares for you. Declare this with conviction as you end this chapter: my hope is restored and my anxieties are allayed when I have confidence in God. I have decided to live in faith today, allowing Him to restore me and multiply my benefits. May my words serve as a testament to what I have learned, encouraging you to pursue knowledge and endeavor to deepen your faith and connection with God. Keep in mind that both learning and becoming closer to God are a process. My films, which are ongoing and fulfilling, recover lost lessons and expand people's understanding of the Holy Word, bringing people of all ages closer to God. To let us know that you have made it this far and that you are traveling this path of faith with us and not with others, leave a comment that reads, "I am closer to God